I have a problem, in the context of like the Green Party, the idea that somehow voting for them is helpful to Palestinians. I just fundamentally disagree with that proposition.
Before you go, we got to talk about this. This is probably where we're going to disagree the most. Not full disclosure, but just for clarity's sake, I'm a Green Party member, have been for 2 decades. And I voted for Jill Stein in 2016, just as an example. And I've been told ever since, I'm responsible for all the ills of the world. Not Trump, who actually did the stuff, not Hillary Clinton, who ran a god-awful campaign and did nothing to convince people to vote for, just Susan Sarandon, me, Eddie Glaude, all the people who did a thing. And I find that very frustrating. And here's what I'll say. I believe that there is a legitimate argument for saying, I'm not voting Green, I'm voting for Hillary or Kamala purely for strategic reasons. I get that argument. And I don't die on that hill. Just like I don't disagree with the person who says I can't vote for genocide, right? But there's an idea, and you've been one of those people who sort of said this before in some form or fashion, that it is a waste of a vote to vote Green, particularly in these contested states, and that it doesn't ultimately help the world. I'm equally unpersuaded by that argument.
Well, I mean, in a swing state, I find it even it's worse than a wasted vote. I mean, look, and I say this, I voted Ralph Nader, and in 2000. And now the Green Party promise, or the promise of the Green Party at that time, was very different than I think it is today, frankly. But I also vote swapped to the extent that you could in a nascent internet at that time, where much of it was dial up. But at that time, you actually had more local elected officials. I mean, significantly, like a third more than you have today. I think I was just reading, like, Ted Glick, who was a longtime Green Party member, left in 2017. He had cited a statistic that, like, back in 2004, it was like 225 officials. Today it's 149. I asked a question of Jill Stein in 2016 in the run up to election through like a TYT town hall type of thing. What are you doing to build the party infrastructure? Like, that's what Nader told us. Nader told us, and I was like, I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And there was no building of that infrastructure. It just, like, he went away. He didn't follow through. That infrastructure was just not built. There was no strategy. It's not articulated. I asked Jill Stein the same question. There's no strategy.
Because I asked her that same question. Obviously, I have some answers for that too. What answer did you get, though, when you asked about the infrastructure these years later?
In 2016, what answer did I get?
Yeah. I'm just juxtaposing that to Nader in 2000.
It's important, I think she said. But there was no articulated plan, and I'm like, this is 16 years later. Like, there should be, our plan is I'm just saying hypothetically, we're going to raise this money on a national level. We're going to use this national campaign to build the campaigns of 10 Congress people who are going to run in the next election. We have identified these districts where we have the highest propensity of progressive Democrats who might vote for a Green Party person. In these districts, we're going to go in there with the money we're raising now. Every dollar that we raise, 20% of that will go to these races. I'm campaigning around with these individuals because in 2 years from now, we want to win 3 House seats, like something like that. It's just a hypothetical.
Yeah. I mean,
nothing.
So that's been my pushback to some extent. I have said to Jill on this show and in private as well. I think that the public reads us as spoilers and grandstanders, that we come around every 4 years, we run for president and we lose. I don't think I know that's not what's actually happening with the Green Party. And so I would encourage people to also recognize the extraordinary pressure that Democrats applied to us in states so that, that they're always knocking us off the ballot.
Oh yeah, 100%.
We don't get media coverage. So it's not like there aren't Green Party members on city councils. It's not like there aren't Green Party members running.
Well, like I say, I think there's like 149 people who are in positions. But like I say, in 2004, there was almost 1/3 more. It was like something like 200.
That's not a lack of infrastructure. I think that's the consequence of being targeted systematically by corporate Democrats. I also think the strategy that has been articulated, and we may agree or disagree with it, and I happen to disagree with it largely, but there is a clear strategy of saying, hey, this presidential stakes, getting 5% of the presidential vote is so important because then we get $10 million, which, for Democrats is a drop in the bucket. They spend that on haircuts. But for the Green Party, that is capacity building to invest in multiple.
Which and again, like I have no real issue with voting for the Green Party in non-swing states. I mean, that was, like that's the vagaries of our system are such that, during like in 2020, I felt like even in blue states, there's value in voting for Biden because Donald Trump, like having the popular vote go for Biden was going to be important. I suspected that like Trump was going to make some type of issue about the election. It turns out he did.
Sure.
And I think that like, having the popular vote, it's only meaningful in a sort of like a narrative sense, right? Like, right. And I think there's an argument for that, but
so you have a mandate. Yeah.
Yeah. But if there's a legitimate sort of like infrastructure building to be done by the Green Party in non-swing states, and that, party members can assess whether there's a legitimate, like, plan that's actually going to be implemented.
But I'm pushing back on the non-swing state part. I'm saying, because basically that argument is you can vote Green as long as it doesn't hurt Democrats.
Well, you can vote Green as long as it doesn't empower Donald Trump.
So here's a different perspective. But let's just use Gaza as one example. If we say, and again, I begin from the premise that Donald Trump will be worse on Gaza. I reject the argument, even the one that Butch Ware made last night on behalf of himself and Jill, that there's no way to know that because that's a hypothetical counterfactual, right? Like we don't know what Trump would have done. It's like, yeah, we do, right?
Right.
Based on history, not based on my guesses, based on and based on his full, what he literally said was, he said they should have done more.
Yeah. And I would also argue it's based upon who is going to elect him and
right.
who is not going to elect him. Like the constituencies, like politicians are not one-to-one receptive to their thing, but like there's nobody who's going to vote for Donald Trump who gives a shit about a single life of anybody in Gaza or Palestine.
But I can still look at Biden Harris and say they have been despicable.
Horrible.
On this issue, right? It's a moral atrocity what's happening in Gaza, and there's absolutely it's entirely indefensible.
Yep.
And so if I'm a voter who's focused on that issue enough for that to be my determining factor, just for the sake of this example, I don't think it's unreasonable for a Green Party person to say, or anybody to say, yes, things will be a little bit worse under Trump on this issue, but I want the genocide to stop. And if Democrats realize that they can't be that proximate to Trump on this issue, the only way I can get a ceasefire, the only way I can get an arms embargo, the only way I can get a divestment from this apartheid, the only way I can do that is if Democrats know that that's the only path to victory for them.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue that there is no way for that voter you've talked about to get those things that they want.
Ever, or just in this election cycle?
Certainly in this election cycle. And
agreed.
And if the material outcome you want is less suffering of the Palestinian people, then you got to go and do what you can to make that happen. And in this instance, it is to diminish the suffering.
What if you knew Democrats would get their butts handed to them for not being principled on this issue, but you knew also, and Trump becomes president, but you knew 4 years from now they'd have to make a different choice? Are you willing? If you knew the outcome was better, would you make that choice?
Here's the thing. Let's back up and talk about 2016. The people I would have this argument with in 2016 were like, we need to teach the Democrats a lesson. Okay. And presumably that lesson is you're not going to win without us voting for you. And you're not going to get these votes unless you do X, Y, Z. Now, one thing is like, now look, I know like mathematically you could put Jill Stein's votes up in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan and say, if they all voted for Hillary Clinton,
that's not fair, of course.
That's not fair. Because we can't say how many of those people would have come out and vote anyways, and whatnot. And there's about
had Trump as their second choice.
There's 20 exactly, and there's about 20 other reasons why Hillary Clinton lost, and at least a third of those are directly she's responsible for. Some she's not, whatever. But if I'm the Green Party, I should be out there going like, "We did it. We told you." We're going to make you pay a price. You paid a price. And it's weird to me that the Green Party then turns around and says, we didn't do this. She did it, which completely ruins their leverage. But aside from that, like, again, I'm not a Green Party member. That seems like a weird strategy to me. It's like, if you want something to happen and it happens, take responsibility for it, because the whole theory is we're teaching you a lesson. You're going to have to come to us next time. And if you don't take credit for doing that, where's the point of that? But put that aside for a moment. That's just a strategic and a tactic. But the fact is that like, it is less expensive, not just in dollars, but in terms of like everything, for the Democratic Party to try and fight the inclusion on the ballot of the Green Party than to shift their policy around in a way that would necessarily support those people. I mean, look, there are times where the Green Party is funded by Republicans, right? And that's the nature of politics. You know, like, people are going to do that. Democrats sometimes will like put an ad like, this person's so conservative, they're too conservative for Pennsylvania, as a way of, you know, helping that person be the nominee. Like that's the nature of politics. But I think like the idea that you're going to teach the Democrats a lesson, it doesn't work. It didn't work after, Bush. It didn't work it didn't work in 2000. It didn't work in 2016. Like, it was completely predictable that after 4 years of Donald Trump, we're going to get the most conservative Democrat in the field. Like, it was completely predictable. Now, he turned out to be better on a lot of stuff than I think probably you or I thought that Biden would be, but it was completely predictable. It was completely predictable that you're going to go with
Clinton. That narrative. I don't accept that framing. I mean, one, I think the teaching of a lesson, and I don't necessarily think that that's how the Green Party thinks about it. I think it's much more effective to say, hey, we're building a movement, we're building a party, and we're fighting for these issues, right? And we no longer have to concede our votes to people who don't respect our view or don't respect our interests and aren't fighting for us, right? But I think when you get from 2016 to 2020, yeah, you get Joe Biden, but you also get Bernie. You also get Elizabeth Warren. I think that the field in general was more to the left, and I think it was the Democratic Party putting their thumb on the scale.
But wait a second. But you got Bernie there. He ran in the primary. Like, I am fully on board with primarying every Democrat at every cycle from the left at any time.
No, but that's not what I mean. But I guess what I'm saying is, I think if Democrats don't put their thumb on the scale, the result, the loss of 2016 turns into a Bernie nomination.
I disagree with that. I think if Bernie had entered into that campaign either 6 months earlier or even entered in when he did, believing he had a chance to win and building an apparatus, he would have won. But I know for a fact that he didn't think he had a chance to win until like January of 2016. And he's calling around to try and get people to, like, we got to do this seriously. And people are going like, it's too late, dude. Like he came in too late in that instance. Now there's no doubt in 2020, there was, Obama stepped in and sort of orchestrate. He did politics, right? Like, I mean, of course, these forces are going to be arrayed. And I should say this, like I was out there canvassing for Sanders. I was desperate to have him be the candidate. But there are also things that even in that run that Bernie could have done differently that would have helped. No doubt. But they also influenced Biden, both him and Warren. We have antitrust and labor policies in this administration as a function of their primary run. And the idea that Biden knew he had to deliver that part of the constituency.
But this is an argument for the Green Party doing what they did. Because
the Green Party's not saying we're gonna like these are constituencies within the Democratic coalition. The Green Party is specifically outside of the Democratic coalition.
Yeah, but the people who voted Green in 2016, many of them were on board with Bernie. Many of them were on board, sadly, with Warren. Many of them were. What I'm saying is, the Democratic Party certainly saw those votes drift away in 2016, and they started moving to the left.
Well, I don't think like the Democratic Party, made a decision to get for those votes. I think there were players within the Democratic Party who saw that. I think the totality, but the Democratic Party, barely exists except for as a way for us to describe a coalition of people, right? No, like I don't think that there are more powerful people within certain sort of like circumstances within the Democratic Party, but I don't think there's a, the type of machinations that you're talking about. I don't think there is a set group of people pulling these levers on every question. No, I mean, I think we can.
Not on every question, no. But I mean, it's very clear that the Obamas and the Schumers and the Pelosi's of the world very clearly orchestrated a Biden exit and a Kamala ascension.
Without a doubt. Well, yeah. I don't know if I don't think they did a Kamala ascension.
Well, not the Biden exit, which led to the Kamala ascension. They did not want Kamala.
They did not want Kamala. And so, their level of control is, iffy. And also, like, look, again, I think if you don't have what's going on in Gaza, there would have been, I know myself, I would, there was a lot of policies about Biden that I liked. And if he had, if he had said to Netanyahu, in, mid-November, okay, you're done. And if you do anything more, you're going to lose this. And then if you haven't done it within 2 weeks, you're going to lose this, and this. And if it's not over by, December, 3, then you no longer have an Iron Dome. Right. Like if he had said that, I certainly know that, like, I don't have that many people watch me, but I certainly know where I would have been on getting Biden out. I would say, like, I want to see him, debate again. That would have been a mistake. It may have been a mistake, but in terms of like support, and so I think like they have the ability, a Pelosi and an Obama and Schumer, and it's going to change, right, at one point as to who those leaders are, and they're going to be to the left, I think, in some extent, to all three of those in 10 years. Just because the center of the Democratic Party has moved to the left. But I think like the way that happens is within the context of primaries. I'm not against, in principle, a third party, but I believe it has to start like that it's wasted on presidential elections. I mean, half of what the Green Party does is simply sort of like fight Democrats, and I don't think it's not working. Fight Democrats in a national election. I think that like you go in and
I share your take on that. It's not half of what they do. I think that's what the media focuses on, because again, it allows the Green Party to look marginal and crazy
well,
and
from the perspective of
organized.
people who if it's one thing if the Green Party just thinks that they can mobilize all these people who don't vote. Um, I mean, I think like, okay, I think there's a lot of evidence that you can't mobilize as many of those people as you think. But, Jill Stein said back in 2016, like we're seeing lesser and lesser people vote. 2018 was record number of Democrats came out
Yeah.
and voted
Right.
in an off year election. I mean,
Trump.
huh?
I guess that's what I'm saying. The election of Trump created a kind of groundswell of desire for resistance. And I'm saying that I think there's an argument to be made that the Green Party could do better organizing and ground game, but the strategy itself of running as a third party, and even you just said Bernie sort of shot himself in the foot and could have won. So the Green Party set the stage for Bernie to win. He just dropped the ball. But if Bernie wins that race,
well, I don't think no. I think the opposite. I think Bernie had a real chance in 2016. I think he was hindered in 2020 on some level by the idea that people thinking like he can't beat Trump.
See, I think in both cases, what the people wanted and what the party powerful wanted were very different. And I think
I agree.
Yeah.
I think Bernie could win, but frankly, I also think in 2016, what's his face, Martin O'Malley could have won.
That's interesting.
I think anybody could have won. I think like Hillary Clinton was uniquely sort of like situated to lose to specifically Donald Trump. Like I think she could have beat Jeb Bush. But I don't think she could beat Donald Trump. But
so I'll give you the last word here. So then, what does if the idea here is that Green Party members, or whatever party, but we're just talking Green, if we don't contest in swing states, if we accept that we can't win this race, then how do we avoid the tyranny of corporate Democrats forever?
Well, I think, listen, 3 or 4 Green Party Congress people could really make a difference in the House, right? Like we're at razor thin margins. A Green Party senator, one who is like, not realizes that they're not going to have like the prime, congressional committees. It's not possible. Like there's a limited amount of things you can do if you're not, working with a party apparatus, but you could on key votes swing things in such a way that I think could exercise outsized power based upon your, your constituencies. And I think like certainly in the context of the Supreme Court, and that's the way that you build. Also, the way that you build more voters. Like it's not just a question of like I don't like the the idea of a duopoly. I don't like the idea. I mean, it's show the thing that the Green Party cannot and has not been able to successfully, in my estimation, project is that we can actually materially change things. Like we have a plan to do it. Like if you can't materially change things, or show a plan to do that, and 20 years later, you have less elected officials, like it doesn't resonate in my mind. I mean, and from a material standpoint, if you want to materially make, save more Palestinians, and that's not, we're not, our politics are just such that we're not at a place where it's like, we're going to be able to push Israel at this juncture right now, the way that we push South Africa. Then you have to, in my mind, vote in that way. Like voting's not an expression. In my mind, voting is not an expression of what you believe. Voting is an expression of what you want to happen. And you have 2 potential outcomes that you're facing at. One is represented by Donald Trump winning, and one is represented by Kamala Harris winning. And you and I both agree that if Kamala Harris wins, there's going to be less Palestinian suffering. Maybe not the eradication, or probably not the eradication of Palestinian suffering, but there's going to be less. And for me, I use my vote for that outcome.
They're in a